They called him Daniel, the quiet IT technician with a soft accent, sharp mind, and a presence most people overlooked. He was always in the background, fixing printers, resetting passwords, and slipping in and out of offices like a whisper. At 5'5", with neatly combed hair and a reserved smile, Daniel blended into the corporate grayness of the London skyscraper he worked in. Then came Clara. She was everything he was not: tall, blonde, polished to perfection. The kind of woman who owned every room she walked into. As the head of marketing, Clara thrived in high-pressure meetings, power lunches, and glossy presentations. Most saw her as untouchable, distant, driven, and wrapped in designer clothes. Until one Thursday afternoon, her laptop had crashed, right in the middle of preparing a pitch for a £1 million campaign. Flustered, she dialed IT. 10 minutes later, Daniel walked in, tool bag in hand, eyes lowered, voice calm. She barely looked up. "It's frozen. I need everything recovered this afternoon." He nodded and got to work. For the first few minutes, silence lingered. Then Clara noticed something different. He wasn't just clicking keys. He was navigating her system like it was second nature. Efficient, gentle, focused. "Where are you from, Daniel?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Nigeria, originally. I moved here for university," he replied, eyes still on the screen. Something in his voice, soft, articulate, made her look up. Their eyes met for a second longer than necessary. For a woman used to surface-level charm, there was something strangely grounding about Daniel's presence. "You're good at this," she said. He gave a small, almost bashful smile. "Thank you." When the system rebooted and the files were restored, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You might have just saved my career." "Just doing my job," he said, packing up. Before he could leave, she added, "Could you drop by tomorrow? I might need help with the email syncing too." Daniel paused, unsure whether it was a real request or just politeness. But something about her tone felt genuine, almost warm. "Of course," he said. He walked out, but her eyes followed him longer than she intended. That night, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing in particular. He told himself it was nothing. Just a routine call. Just another user. But her voice, her presence, had settled somewhere in his thoughts, and it refused to leave. Clara wasn't in the habit of making small talk, especially not with junior staff. But something about Daniel lingered, a calm beneath the chaos, a steady rhythm she found oddly comforting. So, when she called him back to help with the email issue, it wasn't entirely about the email. Daniel arrived the next morning, punctual as ever. He knocked twice before stepping in, polite and poised. Clara offered him coffee, an unusual gesture. He hesitated, then accepted. "This place feels more like a war zone than an office," she muttered, gesturing to the cluttered desk. He smiled. "Tech usually survives the battle. People? Not always." She looked up, amused. "Didn't expect a philosopher." "I read a lot," he shrugged. "Helps me think clearly." That day, they talked more than they worked. It wasn't planned. It just happened, snippets about favorite books, long flights, and how London never really felt warm, no matter the season. One conversation became 2. Then 3. Soon, it became routine. Clara calling for tech support that wasn't urgent, Daniel showing up with quiet eagerness. Their connection grew not in grand moments, but in subtle exchanges, shared jokes, lingering eye contact, and a silence that felt safe. "I don't really talk to anyone here," Clara confessed one afternoon. "People assume I have it all figured out. But I don't." Daniel didn't interrupt. He just listened. It was something she hadn't realized she'd been craving. He, too, found something in her gaze, a recognition. Back home in Nigeria, he had Mariam. Sweet, loyal Mariam, waiting for him. But Clara saw him here, now, in a world where he often felt invisible. The emails began innocently, links to articles, recommendations, late-night jokes. Then came the one that changed everything. "You make me feel seen, Clara." Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. A part of him wanted to delete it and pretend it never happened. But another part, a quieter, hungrier part, felt alive. He replied carefully, "I see you too. More than you know." From then on, the lines blurred. One evening, Clara leaned on the edge of her office desk and said, "My Wi-Fi's been acting up at home. Think you could help?" Daniel looked at her, unsure. She added quickly, "Only if you're free. I understand if not." He nodded. "I'll come by tomorrow evening." That night, Daniel walked home under flickering streetlights, heart heavy. He wasn't sure if he was crossing a line or being pulled over it. But he knew one thing. After tomorrow, nothing would be the same. Clara's flat was nothing like Daniel expected. Warm light pooled across soft rugs and tall bookshelves lined the walls. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and old paper, comforting, intimate, almost staged. She greeted him in a loose sweater and jeans, hair tied back casually, her usual sharpness replaced by something gentler. "The router's in the study," she said, gesturing down the hallway. "Hope it's not too much trouble." He followed, toolbox in hand, but his mind wasn't on Wi-Fi signals or Ethernet cables. It was on the subtle shift in her tone, the softness in her eyes. Something unspoken hung in the air. He felt it in the silence between their footsteps. Minutes passed in quiet repair. When he returned to the living room, she had already poured 2 glasses of wine. "Sit," she offered. Just for a moment. He hesitated, then sank into the armchair across from her. They talked again, but this time, the words carried weight. Clara opened up about her marriage, a union now hollow, built more on convenience than connection. "We don't even argue anymore," she said, eyes distant. "We just exist." Daniel sipped his wine in silence, unsure of what comfort he could offer without overstepping a boundary he already felt crumbling beneath him. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Is there someone waiting for you?" "Mariam," he said. "She's in Nigeria. We've been together for years, saving up to bring her here." Clara nodded, eyes fixed on the glass in her hand. "She's lucky." The room fell still. Then, slowly, she stood and walked toward him. Her hand brushed his shoulder, a touch that sent shivers down his spine. He looked up. Their eyes locked. And for a fleeting second, he forgot everything else. But just as their lips hovered close, Daniel pulled away. "I can't," he whispered. Clara stepped back, pain flickering in her expression. "Why did you come then?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I wanted to feel something real. But not like this." Silence pressed in like a wall. He stood, set his untouched wine down, and walked to the door. As he opened it, she said softly, "I wasn't trying to ruin anything." "I know," he replied, not turning back. That night, Daniel lay awake, guilt pressing down like a weight. He opened his messages and found one from Mariam, excited, hopeful. She had booked her ticket. 2 weeks from now, she would finally arrive. He stared at the screen, ashamed. The next morning, Clara didn't come to work, nor the next day. When she returned, things were different, professional, distant, careful. But the silence between them spoke volumes. Daniel knew a line had been crossed. Even if nothing physical had happened, something sacred had been shaken. And it couldn't be undone. Daniel stood at the edge of a decision he could no longer delay. That weekend, with trembling hands and a weary heart, he recorded a voice message for Mariam. "I need to tell you something," he began, voice raw. "I made a mistake, not in action but in emotion. I let someone get too close. And though I didn't cross the line, I leaned toward it." He expected silence. Or anger. Instead, Mariam replied hours later with a voice as steady as his was broken. "Love doesn't mean never faltering, Daniel. It means being brave enough to tell the truth when you do." Her grace undid him. In that moment, Daniel knew he hadn't just nearly betrayed her, he had almost betrayed the man he thought he was. On Monday, Clara passed him in the hallway. No words, just a nod, a faint smile, and the shared understanding that some things are better left in silence. They no longer exchanged glances or emails. Whatever existed between them had been buried beneath the weight of choice. Clara returned to her poised, professional self, though something softer remained behind her eyes. Not regret, not hope, just acceptance. Daniel, too, shifted. He doubled down at work, started attending local community events, and even bought fresh flowers every Friday for the apartment he'd soon share with Mariam. A slow rebuilding of purpose. The day Mariam arrived at Heathrow, Daniel stood waiting with a sign that read, "Welcome home." She ran into his arms, tears in her eyes. For the first time in months, he felt whole. They walked the streets of London together, hand in hand. Everything felt new, not because the city had changed, but because he had. Daniel no longer saw himself as invisible. He had faced temptation, chosen honesty, and reclaimed his sense of self. One evening, he and Mariam sat on a bench by the river. The city lights shimmered on the water. She leaned into him and asked, "Do you ever think about her?" He paused before answering. "Sometimes. But not with longing. With gratitude. She reminded me who I want to be." Mariam nodded. "And who's that?" "Someone worthy of your trust." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. Clara remained a part of his story, not as a villain or a fantasy, but as a turning point. She wasn't the danger his silence was. The moment he gave voice to truth, the weight lifted. In the end, not every connection is meant to become a relationship. Some exist simply to test our character, to ask us who we are when no one's watching. And for Daniel, that answer, painfully earned, was finally clear.